Seminole Headlines 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV begins right now. -1. Our boys gambling.
Last week, we just had a static picture of him. Well, I guess rotating pictures of him.
Yeah,
we could only get the voice of Corey Clark. This week, we get nothing.
It's all right. You and I are working men. We show up. We're here. He's going to go gamble in Biloxi. We're going to do Seminole Headlines. That's the way it's going to work today.
Who got the better end of this deal? Well, it depends on how he does, I guess.
Yeah, it does. It does. That's Ira. I'm Jeff. You guys are here. Appreciate you doing that very much. Thanks to our man, Ben, who's producing as well. More interviews and things of the like today for Ira to do and some stuff I got to do. So we're once again recording headlines in the morning. And with that, I shall say, yay, sausage. You see it up there on the screen. Our boys at Register Sausage. Hey, I was at Publix last night, and I feel like Register Sausage is moving to the penthouse because it used to be they just had it thrown into that big ice chest in the store where you leaned over and saw all the different kinds of sausages in there. And you're like, oh, there's registers. Now there's a whole wall, Ira.
Dominating.
It's crazy. It's like it's the Jeffersons. They're just moving on up over and over. I walked by. I was like, look at that. It's classy as all hell. I didn't even need Register Sausage because I have some here at the house, and I thought I should get some just the way that it's kind of glowing off the wall set there. It's beautiful. But anyhow, you too can get Register Sausage, as Ira will tell you, everywhere.
Dude, I think we shop at the same Publix. And I actually, the other day, I marveled at how well stocked it was. Because I'll tell you, man, sometimes people are going for that register so much that the supply looks like it's dwindling a little bit. But no, I think I got there on the right day. It was very well supplied. And as you said, you can have it delivered to your house if you go to registermeats.com. You can order all the different varieties or the sampler where you get that's always a good play where you get a variety of different kinds. Or if you're in this part of the country, ever expanding, go to your local grocery store and try it out. Again, the andouille, just throw it in some jambalaya. We throw it in the box jambalaya here at the Schofel house, which, we live right, Jeff. We make our dinners out of a box sometimes and throw a little registers in there. It feels like it's homemade. And then, obviously they've got the breakfast sausages and the spicy and all the different varieties. And we recommend them highly.
Florida State will play baseball later today against South Florida. I ran into you at Dick Hauser Stadium, Mike Martin Field, over the weekend for the weekend series. I commented on it yesterday on the JCS, but we didn't get a chance to have our normal conversation. So I wanted to pick your brain a little bit for everybody who wants the headlines experience and referencing the season openers, if you will, that 3-game sweep of James Madison's about tired of coming to Tallahassee. If I'm James Madison, I don't know that I'm scheduling that again next year. What's that? 3 of the last 4 years they've been swept by us and by Florida State. And that was even when there was a real bad Florida State team. So, it just doesn't go well in Tallahassee, and they didn't handle it well. But I also think, Ira, and I don't know what you came away with, but to me, it's all the different ways that they can get people out, man. Florida State has got to have a depth of pitching staff. This is going to be fun. Like, it wasn't just the starters, and they were all great. But you just see arm after arm coming out of that bullpen from either side. They've got a lot of options and ways to get people out while they figure it out with the offense. The offense was great this weekend, but they may need time to figure it out with certain guys. And I think they'll be afforded that time because of the pitching.
Yeah, I thought, it was an impressive weekend. Link, when we talked to Link after the game on Sunday, 10-0 to complete the sweep, a walk-off, run rule victory. He was a little bit down about the offense. He was disappointed. I think he felt like, especially the first 2 games, he's seen in practices and scrimmages a lot better at bats from a lot of guys throughout the lineup than he saw at times on Friday and Saturday. Sunday was, I think, a lot better. I think they pounded out 18, 19 hits or something like that. And it was a lot of guys, just going the other way, not being overly aggressive, not swinging early in the count at breaking balls, things like that. So he was happier there. But I think, but the fact that he was kind of not thrilled, I think speaks to maybe how good this team can be. Because the arms, they stand out. That's the strength of this team. But I was really impressed by the defense. I thought they made a lot of difficult plays look really routine in the infield and the outfield. You see how that speed on the corners is going to change things compared to what they've been dealing with the last few years. I say dealing with, they great bats in the outfield,
Yeah.
but not great defense. And now they've got, I think they're going to have exceptional defense. But also, one of the things I liked, and you mentioned like all the different ways they can beat you. James Madison really struggled defensively, and I think
Couldn't pick it up.
I think it got in their head. They're playing in front of 6,000, 7,000 people. That probably is not a regular occurrence for them. And I know they've got some new guys in the lineup, and they just didn't handle it well. But what I liked was that even as they're kicking it around, it didn't ever seem to affect this Florida State team. Like these guys kept stealing bases, kept playing well. Sometimes a team that's struggling can kind of bring you down to their level, and I didn't see that. And I thought for a first weekend that was one of the other things that impressed me.
Well, and if you are going to be given extra outs at any point, you got to make people pay. And I really feel like James Madison not only didn't handle that situation very well, they got a little unlucky in that every time they screwed up, somebody came up with a hit.
100%.
In the very next at bat. That's the other thing is we know about baseball being one of these weird games where you can outplay a team, but if you don't get a timely hit, it may not matter. We see teams get 16 hits to the other opposing team's 4 and lose a game just because that 4 happened to come with 2 outs and 2 men on each time or something like that, right? But every time that poor center fielder for James Madison dropped a fly ball, let it roll under his glove. That slapdick, he was terrible. That was something to behold. That poor bastard I don't know that I could run him back out there for a series, but
there was one inning there that the PA announcer, I guess it might have been Sunday, but one of the PA announcer announced in the press box, the internal PA goes, we have several defensive replacements for the Dukes. I was like, yeah. Probably could have started that earlier in the weekend.
Should have grabbed some dudes out of the stands. It's not like they were botching difficult plays. These are routine. You had a dropped fly ball, which led to a big inning. You ended up having a one hopper that my man can't pick up that rolls to the wall. But again, credit and kudos to Florida State's offense, because the next man up that gets the opportunity after a 2-out error came through with a ringing single or worked a walk or did something to prolong the inning, which led to runs later in the inning. So James Madison, while giving away gifts, watch Florida State take advantage of those gifts over and over and over again. And that's a sign of a good team who's focused and locked in as well. It's interesting, Ira, you bring up Link being disappointed with some of the ABs. You never really know what to think about that early in the year because guys are so anxious and so excited and they want to make an impact. And they want to everybody wants to get off to a great start because baseball's hard. And if you get off to an 0 for 10 slump or something like that, it can bury you. But I thought that they got better at bats as the weekend went on. I thought that first game, it was funny. There were some terrible at-bats. I mean, especially from good hitters. Lodi's had a 3.
Oh, man.
Oh, my God. That one at-bat was as bad as it comes. It's just like 3 sliders away, and he's like looking ridiculous. And he screamed at himself for it. But he's a good player and a good hitter. And he ended up having a good weekend. But it's you do realize that guys are anxious. So I think that was kind of the byproduct of just the enthusiasm of opening day. And they got great weather for it for the most part. And Hauser, buddy, baseball at FSU is back. I mean, if we didn't know already, every game, that was incredible.
Yeah, I was telling, we have an intern, Andrew, who's helping us out, and I told him, I said, the FSU, what makes the crowd at Hauser is always going to end up being the students, because the grandstands are almost always going to be full. The locals who buy those season tickets every year, they're going to come 90% of the time, 95% of the time, unless the weather is terrible. But when the students are invested, that's when you get the bleachers packed and the whole place is just buzzing. And you started to see that more and more last year. Remember the games where they had to shut students out.
Yeah.
Students are climbing the fence to get in for the Florida game. I mean, in that, it's been cool to see that. I think part of it maybe is, football and basketball have not been good this year. So maybe that's part of why the students are so excited. But yeah, no, the crowd was awesome. And I do think that's part of, what probably led to some of that pressure on some guys. I mean, I think the most obvious example is Miles Bailey, freshman first baseman from Tallahassee, one of the top players in the country coming out of high school, 20th round draft pick. He's a Tallahassee kid. He's playing at Hauser for the first time in his life, and he's got 7,000 people in the stands. And he had some rough at bats that first day, but and he's seeing better pitching than he's, used to seeing in high school.
Sure.
But as the weekend went on, Sunday he goes 3 for 5, really, some controlled swings, hitting the ball the other way. And so, that's the cool thing about following a baseball team, especially a team with some new parts, is, you'll see that development and how guys handle. And like you said, Lodi's terrible Friday, comes back and has a really good weekend.
Yeah, I think you hit on something that's really fun, especially if somebody's kind of new to following baseball on a weekly basis. Watching guys adjust and overcome, whatever weaknesses they have in their game. They don't always do it. Some guys you recognize halfway through the season are like, well, that's just who he is, and that's going to be a problem. But other guys, especially the newcomers, like you're talking about, this is a different setting. This has to be overwhelming. I'm older now with a 17-year-old kid and a 14-year-old kid. And I think of them when I'm watching their athletic events and like, what are they thinking and what are they, and I get nervous for them, and I think like, because when you're doing it, you don't ever think about it. So it's hard for me to remember, was I nervous when I was 15, 16, 17? But when I'm watching even college kids now, because that's how old we are, they all seem like kids to me. Right. They all seem so little to me. I mean, maybe not little in stature. Miles Daly's a monster. But I'm like, oh, that poor young man. He must be so nervous. I hear myself saying that, Ira. Like the 25-year-old talk show host would have never said that. No. Now I'm sitting here like, oh, well, I understand, young man. It's okay. I mean, there are a lot of people here. I'm like in my head. I'm sitting there thinking about that. But you're right. Watching those adjustments, like I'm really eager to see tonight's game against USF or today's game against USF because I love the early portion of the season, those first couple of weeks where guys are getting opportunities and we see how they adjust their mindset. We see how they adjust in terms of confidence or lack thereof or something in between. And then also we're watching Link try to figure out what's the best lineup for this team and which guys should play more and which guys should play less and how's it going to look throughout the lineup. Can they lengthen the lineup? Last year's team early on, we learned pretty quickly, Ira, man, there really wasn't going to be a respite for opposing pitchers. You were getting down to 6, 7, and 8 in the lineup, and all those guys had powers and if they got into hitters counts, they were going to make you pay.
Yeah, I mean, they just did so much damage. And that's, and again, it looks different. It already looks different, and it's going to look different. I mean, you had so many guys in that lineup that just, I mean, but this, I think this lineup's solid, man. I like some of these guys, and I really like just the well-roundedness of this team. I think they stole 8 bases on Sunday. Mm-hmm. There were some double steals. You just saw some aggressiveness on the base paths, and then, the defense. I thought Link it was pretty cool listening to him talk about Chase Williams, junior college transfer outfielder who he thinks may be the most explosive runner he's ever had on a baseball team in terms of just from a standstill to full speed. And he, I loved Gage Harrelson, the transfer from Texas Tech.
He had a great week. Good point, Ira. He was awesome. That kid, he's going to help us a lot. Yeah.
He's fun to watch. You like the way he plays. He looks like the kid that he's always going to leave with a dirty uniform.
Yep.
And, just gritty. And man, the only not negative thing, and I think it's, we talked about this a little bit with last year's team.
No, they're impossible, Ira. It's buddy, you can say it. They're impossible.
They're they feel themselves a little bit. Which,
buddy,
that's going to be fun to watch over the course of a.
It is so funny because, all right, you're capable, I think, of being slightly more objective than me when it comes to Florida State baseball. Like I remember being a student and I remember sitting in the stands doing homework and, now you've got obviously a graduating daughter and everything else that's gone to Florida State. And, so I know there's some ties there, but as a Nole, I want them to be good in all sports. I also want them to play a certain way. And buddy, this is such a conflicting thing when I watch us play, because I'm going to say it. They're a bunch of a-holes. And here's the thing. There are a-holes. and by the way, I will also note, in order to be fair, I flip around. I watch college baseball. I like college baseball. Not everybody watches games outside of their favorite team. I actually do, especially if it's going to be teams we're going to have to beat possibly down the road in the ACC or a regional or super. What I still call them regionals and sub-regionals and supers. Anyhow, if They all play that way.
This is college baseball.
And this is what they do. They all do it. I don't know when it started or how it started. I want to blame Tennessee. I feel like it was Tennessee's fault. Probably was Tennessee's fault. And that coach is a jerk. But, man, that's the antithesis of the way that Link Jarrett played.
Well, it's funny, man. I think it's and I always wonder, like you said, you wonder what's in those kids' minds. Sometimes I wonder what's in Link's mind as he's watching some of these pimp shots. And, and I think, I think what I expected probably out of his teams was going to be what we saw at his team at Notre Dame when they played Tennessee.
Well, they were brash.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, Tennessee was super brash, but the Notre Dame guys were confident.
And they gave it back.
But I didn't expect it to be quite like this. But I'll say this. There were times we lamented where even before the Tennessee thing of the last 5-6 years, where there were times in the last 20 years, when Mike Martin was running the program and he was so much about, the class and the playing the right way and that kind of thing. And other teams would chirp. And there were pockets, you'd have a Tyler Holt, Quincy Neaporte. You'd have a few guys here and there.
Tyler Holt was exemplified.
He would have fit in well.
He might have been third tier on this team.
No, I think they would have elevated his game. He would have felt more at home and would have been more at ease. But but there were times where it felt like, hey, you guys need to stand up for yourselves. They're on your field talking like this and dancing and doing all the stuff they're doing. A couple of times Miami came in here and I felt like, they're kind of putting it out there in their face. And sometimes Florida State didn't respond. So, I don't know if there's ever a perfectly happy medium. I thought this weekend maybe it was a little high, but man, it's opening weekend. Those guys are fired up. At least that you can tell they like each other. I mean, this is a team that clearly these guys, there's really good chemistry, I think, in that clubhouse.
Yeah, Link has fostered it. There's no doubt. And they do a good job. And I just think it is part of college baseball now. I watch these other games and kids do all the theatrics and all of that after every home run. Doesn't matter if it's a game against James Madison or if it's against a rival. They do it all the time. At least they're consistent about it. I just don't. The thing I take umbrage with is there's no reason to hit a home run and then talk smack to the second baseman as you round the. I mean, the dude's just standing there. He didn't do it. I don't get it. I don't understand any of it. But we'll see it, and there may be no greater culprit than Max Williams, who's buddy. That's how many times do you think he and a catcher are going to exchange words after he stands there for a half an hour, watch the ball? That's a move. I mean. He's I was thinking, are you going to run at all on that home run? I mean, and it was a Titanic blast, but dude, you got to circle the bases here.
Oh boy, it's an interesting group. It's an interesting group for sure.
They're brash, but they're good, and it was fun. And I'm glad Florida State baseball's back. Seminole Headlines 93.3 Real Talk Radio. Warchant TV continues in a moment. Won't spend a lot of time on this, obviously, just because it's been a long season and we know where it's headed. Florida State basketball got stomped over the weekend in a game you were at. I wrote, well, since Corey's not here, we can talk about it. When did he become a little girl? And you have to wear a freaking sweater and a parka and a scarf because you're in the Civic Center, the TLC double C. But anyhow, making fun of Corey for getting so skinny. What's he, $120?
I'm at the game and Stephanie texted us a picture of he and I sitting down there in the press area. And I literally, when I saw the picture, I didn't even recognize it was him. And she said he looked like the Unabomber. He had his hoodie pulled over his head like a 6-year-old in a blizzard.
Yeah.
But he was sitting next to me. I didn't realize he had done that at one point. I did know that he mentioned how cold it was at least 4 times during that basketball game. So I was not surprised that at one point he actually pulled the hoodie over his head. But listen, man, he also might have been pulling over his head to disguise himself, not wanting people to know he's an FSU beat writer because that basketball team is struggling. That was about as bad as it gets. They were not competitive. Clemson's good, and give Clemson credit, man. Like they weren't, they didn't shoot well, but kind of like we complimented FSU baseball for not letting James Madison suck, deter them from executing.
Deter Clemson, no.
I mean, it was just layup, dunk. I mean, you were seeing what a good offense and defense should look like, and they throttled Florida State. So, we're down the home stretch, man. They play Miami Wednesday night at home, which should be an interesting game. It's a rivalry game. got a couple more home games, but I think the biggest story there is just going to be what's going to happen next with the coaching search.
Well, and I was going to get to that, and I just want to say that Brad Brownell was not afraid to keep his starters in the game.
That was interesting.
Ham pulls his entire starting five, and he puts in a bunch of young guys, which for people out there that didn't watch, and A, I don't blame you. B, it was an ass kicking. You might not have still been watching at this point. But Ham signals the no mas, it's over. We know it's over. And he pulls all of his starters. And Brownell's like, yeah, man, great. And he just keeps his starters in, and they keep on firing. I don't expect you to quit. You don't have to lay down, and you don't – but – man, let's pull our starters from the game, and he didn't do it. So Ham had to put his starters back in. I don't know if I would have anyhow, but that was interesting. Even because Brownell was complimentary of Ham after the game.
He was, yeah.
But I thought that was odd. Maybe it's just a mindset. I mean, far be it to me to quibble with a Clemson team that is going to the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this: if for as long as Brad Brownell's been in this league, he's been in the league for a long time.
Yeah.
One of the longest compared to Leonard Hamilton, but he might be the second most tenured.
I think he's the second now. Yeah.
And they've always had a really good relationship. And back when Clemson was not as good, Leonard Hamilton would always kind of defend him, which I always kind of wondered. One day I want to ask Leonard, he would always defend the coaches that were struggling. And I always wondered if he was just trying to keep them around longer. Let me defend this guy a little. You defend Paul Hewitt back in the day.
Yeah, oh man, keep Paul. Paul's doing a great job. Keep him around. Yeah.
And all the variety of bad Miami coaches. Yeah, so he. But I think they've had a good relationship. He was asked about it. It was actually I think it might have been a Clemson reporter that asked him about Brownell about leaving his starters in late, and Brownell said he just wanted them to finish the game the right way. He didn't want them to just get sloppy the last few minutes. I don't know. I don't know what it was. Sometimes, people wonder about the net now. It was a road game. If you win by 26, maybe that helps you. I don't know. But I don't think Leonard took it the wrong way. They've had a good relationship. So I don't think it was personal. I don't think. But yeah, man, it's maybe they'll play better. I think the problem in that game was some of the games Florida State's come back and won or played well. The other team has not been very good, but the Clemson's good, man. They're obviously really good. And so they're not Duke. They don't have the superstar players, but that's just a really good basketball team.
Yeah, and they're fresh off of beating Duke. And,
right.
He's got that thing rolling right now. They're already over 20 wins and all of that. And, he's done a good job. It's disappointing. I had a bit of a diatribe yesterday about this. It just hurts my soul. The predicament Florida State finds themselves in where they're not in a position to care as much about basketball as you'd like them to. And it's not a good look and I know none of them would admit to this, but we have eyes and we also understand what's going on. All resources have to be into football right now and football facilities and everything else, right? They've got the lawsuit. They've got the the football only facility. They've got the stadium renovation. And so it's all things football. And I got it. It's just, you feel like you're left in the wind. You're just out there. There's no rhyme nor reason. Now they're in the process of trying to find their next coach. And on that note, Luke Laux was in over the weekend. He was seen in the building. I've reached out to Luke and asked him if that's something that he wants to do. I reached out a while back. He said, absolutely, it's something he wants to do. He was not bashful about it, didn't hide it, said, yes, I'd love that job. We'll see if it works out. There are many other people who want that job, Ira. Do you know, what do you think the timeline is? And I guess fill in the gaps here. I'm just speaking broadly. Is there anything that you want to add to Florida State's coaching search conversation?
Yeah, the two I would say internal candidates, the two candidates that really had the most buzz coming into the search were, Luke Laux and Sam Cassell, because over the last 2 years, as the people who really care about Florida State basketball, the donors, the former players, they've all known that this day was eventually going to come, whether it came on a high note for Leonard Hamilton or a down note as it is, that day was going to come. So they've all been kind of trying to figure out, okay, where do we go next? And so there's been conversations, as you said, Luke Laux, and there are people around the program who've encouraged him, want him to come back and maybe take over the program. There's people that have Same thing with Sam Cassell. So there was movement for those guys long before Leonard announced anything.
Right.
And I believe they both interviewed. I think Charlton Young, former FSU assistant coach, who's now at Missouri under Dennis Gates. He's, very much in the mix. But then there are other people outside, and those are going to be harder for us to kind of nail down because we don't have connections to them. As you said, you can talk to Luke Laux. I can call CY. I mean, we know Sam Cassell has been ever present. So, those names are going to be the ones people hear the most. And I think sometimes the fans think, well, that's all they're looking at. That's clearly not all they're looking at. I mean, they're talking to, from, people I've talked to, I think they've talked to active head coaches. And when I say talk to, I don't know that it's been formal interviews,
right.
But there's been conversations with active head coaches in college basketball, assistant coaches, and across the ACC and other conferences. This is a pretty broad search. They're talking to a lot of different people. At the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised though if it came down to some of those guys with FSU connections. And and I think Luke or CY they'd probably be my two top choices. I'm a bigger proponent of CY because I do Charlton Young because I've seen him get players. Luke, I think, is super sharp. I think he's probably interviewed really well, and a lot of people are pushing for him. And I think he probably would do a very good job. The thing with CY is we've seen it. He got players. He's getting players at Missouri. They're a top 25 team. They're going to challenge for the SEC. He got players when he was at Florida State for 10 years. He got players when he was at Auburn, at Georgia Tech. He is a tremendous recruiter, as good a recruiter probably as Leonard Hamilton was in his heyday. So that's where I would kind of steer. But as you said at the beginning, the challenge here is Florida State's not going to hire one of these high-priced coaches that fans might want. A lot of people on the message boards are saying, well, look what Bruce Pearl did at Auburn. Well, you're not hiring Bruce Pearl. No. Florida State does not have the money because of all the things you mentioned and because they're in the frickin' ACC with this ballooning revenue gap. They cannot commit the resources to go get a coach that would get a job in the SEC. And so, it's going to be, you're going to get the best you can get with the recognition that it's not going to be maybe what some fans want. But that doesn't mean you can't have success. Listen, man, like when Florida State had it rolling from in the mid 2000s, 2000 teens to 2020, that team, with all those NBA guys, that was not a team that was built on NIL. Mm-hmm. And I think you can have success with, a little bit less resources in basketball. It's a little bit, I think because the numbers are smaller, you can have a little more success than maybe in football. So we'll see where it goes. But, that is the reality I think that's hitting some FSU fans is this search, while it's going to be wide, it's not going to involve some of the coaches that maybe some fans want.
Yeah, and this is one of those rare times, I'll reiterate something we've talked about before. I kind of feel like it's important to have an FSU guy here. I've never, and I would consider CY that. So, right. So, as somebody who's worked in the program, been in the program, understood how the politics and the economics work at FSU when it comes to basketball. It's never going to be priority one. It might not be priority two in Tallahassee. I mean, Florida State baseball has a legendary following and investment. So, but I also, and again, I always want the best man. So normally I'm not married to the idea that you have to have ties, but I think because it's a little bit of a different kind of job, it might be a good thing to have somebody with ties. But you hit the nail on the head. Regardless if it's CY, if it's Sam Cassell, if it's Luke Laux or anybody else, this is going to be about somebody who can do more with less and about somebody who has a real plan for talent acquisition. It's basketball. We all know the deal. If I got the best player on the floor, there's a chance I win. I mean, it's just like we see it all the time. We see like a guy who can drop 30 and score buckets when you have to have them can take over games. You just need complementary parts and you have to have a vision for how you want to play. So I'm kind of curious, any of those guys, I'll root for all of them. Whoever it is that can bring in players, and I see why you would lean towards CY there because he's proven that he can bring in players. I'm fine with him. I'm fine with Luke if he can bring in players.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
I'm fine with Sam if he can bring in players. Whoever it is that can get players to say yes to Florida State, I'm in.
Yeah, and I think it's all accentuated now. And we have this conversation on our message boards at Warchant the other day on the basketball board, which has been pretty vibrant lately because of what's going on. And I said that Leonard Hamilton made the comment the other day that it's the challenge. You got 10 new players this season, blah blah blah, and that's true. But I said, listen, man, you can't use that anymore because this is not college basketball of what we grew up with.
Right.
And so now all these coaches, the coaches are going to be successful are the coaches that can bring in a roster, teach whatever you're going to teach, streamline it, get them to be competent and confident in whatever you are going to teach in this 1 year window. Because you don't know if you're going to have guys for 2 or 3 or 4 years. Clemson is an anomaly. They're kind of, what Leonard Hamilton used to have. That's what they are. The Chase Hunter kid's been there 6 years. Now they've got his younger brother coming, and I'm sure he's
tired of him. Good God, take it on down the road. You're 30 years old.
They've got several kids on that team that have been in the program for several years. They've figured out a way to do it, right? And that's good for them. But for the most part, man, all these teams around the country are going to be shuffling players in and out. You don't have the luxury of building a program for 3 or 4 years where guys have to learn your system and all the nuances. And that was the strength of Leonard Hamilton's career. Those guys that would be in the system, Ryan Reed and those guys that be in a program for years and know every nuance of the defense. They knew the defense better than Leonard did by the time they were done. And, you can't do that anymore. So that's why I think it all goes to player acquisition, even more so than ever, because you just got to get talent for this 1 year and then figure out what you're going to have for the next year. But the other thing you mentioned, the FSU ties, and I just want to agree with you 100%, 1,000%. It's not about the ties, because some people will say, why do we have to have an FSU guy? It's not about the ties or feeling comfortable with them. It's them understanding the lay of the land. Some of the coaches that they have talked to, and again, this is talked to loosely, coaches on the radar. Some of these assistant coaches from these blue blood type programs, man, are they going to have any idea what they're walking into here? Steve Robinson had no idea what he was walking to at Florida State, and it showed. Leonard Hamilton had been at programs that needed somebody to be creative and resourceful, and that's why he was able to have some success at Florida State. You got to have that in you, man. Like, you can't bring somebody who's been a number 2 assistant for a Roy Williams or some other great coach and expect them to be as resourceful. So I think that really, I'll be really disappointed if they don't get somebody who has proven, and again, it doesn't have to be Florida State ties, but I think that's important because they have to understand what they're getting into.
Well, and I think to put a ribbon on this, to further that point, Ira, in addition to understanding kind of what you're walking into, so you imagine, and you just painted the picture perfectly, because I was here when Steve Robinson came in. I interviewed him. I talked to him every week when he was here, and it got difficult, man, because I would watch us lose every week and watch us lose every road game and watch.
And he's a super nice guy and knows basketball. One of the nicest
of all time.
Right.
But I think he was in shock. I don't think he ever thought that he would have so little to work with and no tradition to really fall back on. I know that people take umbrage with that, but let's be honest, Florida State's had very small pockets of success in its history. They have had some, without question, but not a lot. And not enough to have a through line that people can feel, like, where you walk into some arenas and you're like, you feel the history. Right. Come on, that's not Florida State. But the thing I think about is, if you have those Florida State ties and you care about the program, whether it's because you coached here or you played here or both or whatever it might be, when times are tough and you're having to get by with less, if you have a passion and a real love, an affinity for the institution, the place, it makes it easier to deal with the shortcomings, because you A, already know they exist, and B, you have something more than just a profession that is drawing you towards this. I love this place. There's a part of me here.
Whoa.
And so, that's a big deal.
We've seen it. We've seen it with coaches that come in and are almost immediately disgusted. I'm not going to say disgusted, but like they
on here? Yes.
They immediately focus on what they don't have. And that's not just at Florida State. It happens at schools I've covered elsewhere. When a coach comes in and this isn't what I expected, I don't have everything I wanted, everything I needed. I mean, shoot. I mean, Jimbo Fisher, and he became more resourceful, but he could not believe the lack of talent when he got here. He couldn't believe the lack of facilities. He couldn't believe they didn't have a place to practice indoor. The reason they built that indoor facility was how they missed those practices before the season opener against Clemson.
He was furious. Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean? We stopped practicing? Because it's raining outside. And so, you see that and you feel that and you don't want that. And you can't, And the other thing is if football, when Jimbo came in and was basically, I'd say, disgusted about some things at Florida State and where the program was, he could express that frustration and people there was action from that because it was Florida State football.
Yeah.
Man, you come in here and start blaming the facilities or blaming anything at Florida State basketball, nobody's going to hear you or care. No. Get it done, man. Figure it out. So yeah, man, that's I think a big part of it.
No, that's 100% true. And I can remember the many gripe fests that I was on the other end for with Jimbo Fisher. I mean, I remember one year really quickly saying to him, cause I got tired of it, and he probably frustrated my sensibilities. The Noel in me got pissed off. He's prattling on about all these things that we don't have and all the reasons they're at a disadvantage against those they seek to compete against. And he's saying this to me, and it's 2015. And I go, we just won the national championship in 29 straight games.
And they just redone the locker rooms and the coaches' offices because he wanted that done. But then now it's, we need a new facility, which he was right on.
He's right about that. But when he was doing that, I wanted to at the same time compliment him, but also illuminate for him how absurd it is to say what you can't do when you just won 29 straight games and a national title. What are you talking about, man? Don't discredit yourself like that. Seminole Headlines 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV continues in a moment. Rounding out the hour, an hour that has flown past with our discussions of Florida State baseball, Florida State basketball, and now we can help it fly past with visions of Tavello beer. How about that? By the way, I don't know if you can see it behind me. Ira, can you see that behind me? You see that? That's a coaster.
Oh, you got the coasters.
I got the coasters kicking ass over here. Well, I spend a lot of time at the computer, and I need a coaster for my beer while I'm spending time. There we go. Look at us. Look at us.
All the props.
Yeah.
And
all the props indeed.
Yeah, I was up at Tavello Brewing in Thomasville, Georgia, just up the road from Tallahassee. It's basically driving from one side of Tallahassee to I'm honestly, from where we live, Jeff, up northeast Tallahassee, it's as quick to get to Tavello as it would be to get to some other places in Tallahassee, especially.
Tom says we live in Georgia.
It's back in the day, this part of the city felt like Georgia.
It did.
It's changed a lot over the years. But I was up at Tavello over the weekend having a few beverages. Kim had a knitting class.
Oh, another one.
Yep.
So it's a weekly thing.
Brushing up on some techniques. I was like, sure, honey, I'll come up too. So I went to the basketball game Saturday afternoon. I missed baseball Saturday, and I went up to Tavello, hung out for a few hours. They had a great crowd. It was Thomasville had their sidewalk sale, so everything was buzzing, and enjoyed some great Tavello. And actually, I'm partial to the coffee blonde, as you are as well.
It's really good, yeah.
But actually, somebody they had a bad pour. They poured the wrong beer for somebody, so they were kind enough to let me try it. So I got to try one of the different varieties. I think it wasn't the Rose City Lager. I think it was it was the blonde ale.
Oh, nice.
Pretty tasty as well, man. They have a variety if you like the stouts or if you like the IPAs or the lagers. There's all the different varieties. Great people, good time, and encourage people to go up there.
When you say try, you mean drink the full beer.
Oh, of course. Yeah. In fact, I had just gotten a beer, so that beer was not the
double fisted.
So no, but it so it was going to get a little warm, and it wasn't the beer I requested. So Paul, my friend who I was with, he was like, "You want me to get you one that you really wanted?" And I was like, "No, I'm good. I'm good here."
Well done, buddy. That's what I just laughed because you said, "Well, they gave me a chance to try it." I'm like, "You drank the whole beer. Don't give me this nonsense. I tried it." Tavello, we appreciate them being on board with us, and we do really, really enjoy their beer. And in addition to that, wonderful people, like you said, wonderful people out there.
Maurice and Lynn, the whole crew, they're all awesome.
Fantastic. All right, so let's mention again for everybody who's wondering what the hell is going on. I just tuned into Seminole Headlines, and it's not the three of you; it's just the two of you. Yep, Ira and I are soldiering through while Corey is off gambling. Hey, listen, man, I like to gamble. I'm not knocking him for gambling, but he just decided this is a week he needed to take it on over to the various sites. I won't out him.
And I did tell him, because this is the beauty of our relationship is when we decide because we're having to record early because the football interviews are on Tuesday afternoons for this whole month. So we've been doing these recorded versions in the morning. And the constant battle between Jeff and Corey is, Jeff would like to do these early in the morning. Corey would like to do these later in the morning.
Yeah.
Because Corey likes to sleep. And so we're doing this at 8:30 because, which is probably still not early for Jeff.
Not at all. Been up for a few hours.
more in my wheelhouse. There's no way in hell we could have got Corey on here at 8:30. But I told him, I said, listen, man, you might be rolling back into the hotel if you're on a heater. You might be rolling. Yeah, I said, come on, tell us about your winnings. And he's like, yeah, there's no chance of that happening.
No,
so we don't have Corey this week.
I get it. But
how much do you think he's won? How much do you think he's won so far? 20 grand, 25 grand?
No chance of that either. He may. Doesn't he only play like one thing? That's the funny thing. When he tells me that he's going to go to a casino, I'm always like, well, I don't think he likes to play a lot of the games.
Yeah, he plays that one game. What is it called? Pai
Gow.
Pai Gow.
Yeah,
that's he plays that, and he says he likes it because you get a lot of action without having to invest a ton. A lot of times you just after the hand or whatever is dealt, a lot of times you don't either win or lose, and you just hang out for a while. But which is crazy, because it's probably a good thing. Good for Corey to have some discipline, because I think Corey could sit down at some bigger tables. He's got some funds to work with, but he's trying to show some discipline and not sit down at the $100 tables. And he's having a good time. He likes to he and Steph are having a good time, I'm sure.
Well, I hope they're enjoying themselves, and we'll hold it down. We do get to headliner questions next hour, which we will be happy to answer. I think we've worked out a pretty good deal here, Ira, now, where everybody will be satisfied because, and I'm sure we'll get to every one of these questions today. I haven't gone through all of them yet. I will.
Oh, so he probably didn't even do a Facebook prompt, I'm guessing.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So we may just be Twitter bound. Yeah. I'll take a look either way. But what I would say is that any questions we don't get to now, I'm using them for the bonus hour of the JCS, man. And that way everybody gets their questions answered. It's maybe not by all three of us or two of us in this case, but questions are going to be answered, damn it. We're going to get to them. And it's a cool situation because the show's done well. Let's just put it that way. We've done very well because of the support of the listeners over the years. But the point of me saying that isn't to brag. The point of me saying that is that we now get way too many questions for me and you and Corey to answer.
And give any real thought to,
Well, and also like we have to have our discourse because that's the show. So it's like we're going to go off on tangents. I don't want to stop doing that. We're going to have points that we want to make outside of the questions. And so, sometimes questions suffer. We just don't get to them.
Yeah. But now you get them in the bonus hour.
Now so stay tuned. In the bonus hour. Yeah, you get them in the bonus hour. You also get them in the Renegade room when we do the extra.
Oh, that's right.
The 20 to 30 that we do extra with just the Renegade room. And by the way, if you're not doing that, you should be doing that. You sign up for that. What do they sign up for, Ira?
So if you're already a Warchant subscriber, there's an option to go the ad-free option to where you get no ads on the website anymore, which is always a positive thing. Plus, you get access to the Renegade room, which is another message board, which has additional content from us, including about a 30-minute, usually
20 to 30, sometimes 40.
Version of headlines later in the week where we just answer some of the questions that they have. And again, it's just basically, I think Gene's got a deal where if you sign up, if you're already a subscriber and you signed up for it, they give you some gift cards to kind of basically offset. It's, it's, I don't know, $20-30. I'm not sure exactly the amount for the year, but, or if you're not a subscriber, when you sign up, you can get the normal subscription or you can get the ad-free option, which has additional content like the bonus Seminole headlines.
So I'm hoping we get asked about this next hour, and in about 30 seconds here, we can talk about it. Have you thought it funny that in the last 24 hours, there are a lot of people reading articles about the meetings this week in New Orleans between the Big Ten and the SEC, and in the response to those articles about these two power leagues deciding the future of college football is that, hey, this doesn't seem right.
It's just
where you been? Where you been, everybody?
It's the whole thing's ridiculous. The whole thing is so ridiculous. This has been going on in plain sight for years now.
Yeah,
right?
Buddy.
It's why Florida State sued, because they want to be in one of those conferences. It's why Clemson sued. It's why North Carolina is having their hidden secret meetings that were written about recently to try to figure out how they're going to get in one of those conferences also. And then you've got these other schools and these other leagues that are hanging on hope. But I love my favorite thing. We'll talk about it in the next hour. But my favorite thing is people are like, what can Jim Phillips do, or what, nothing. There's nothing you can do. Just take it, wear it, because you're left. You're going to be left out.
The moment of truth is already come and gone.
Right.
They ceded all their say and power. They did this willingly.
I mean, I think that, they saw the writing on the wall. It is what it is. I mean, at the end of the day, when the SEC and the Big Ten are like, look, we'll leave you and do our own thing. I mean, I don't know how many options you have left. It's none of this is good for the sport. I'm with everybody who are sitting here screaming at the clouds right now. None of this is good for the sport. No. But if you're leading Florida State and you're the administration here, this is why you're doing what you're doing.
Oh yeah, and you were made to feel shame at one point. Right. And screw all those people. Hour number 2 forthcoming. Stay with Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV. Hour number 2, Seminole Headlines. Headliner questions coming your way in just a moment. Just to reiterate for those just tuning in, today's show just me and Ira. Corey on a brief vacation this week, enjoying some time with his wife, Stephanie. We hope they're having a blast, but Ira and I wanted to soldier on, make sure we gave you some fresh content, so here we are. We'll get to those questions in a moment. First, I want to say thanks to Birch Orthodontics. Dr. Birch and her crew, nearly complete, almost done with, I would say, this is like their masterpiece. This is the painting we've all been waiting for. My youngest son is within 7 days of being out of braces. So that's where we're at. That's it. And what an undertaking. What an undertaking. But now his teeth look nearly perfect. They will be perfect in 7 days, I'm told. Let's get it done. I'm pumped. Here we go. Yay, Birch Orthodontics.
Again, I think, man, we may get the whole community together for that last visit. If you want to put it out there, Jeff, you feel free to put it out there on Twitter. What time he's going to be walking out of Birch Orthodontics, and we can all celebrate the achievement. But they really do great work. They're Dr. Heather Birch has been in business running that operation over there for well over 20 years now. I mean, it's got to be thousands of kids that she's helped, and not just kids. If you're older and you need orthodontic work, they do tremendous work, great customer service. The best part about it, again, it all started with us going in there. My family, my daughter and my oldest daughter, all three of them ended up going there for getting braces. But my oldest daughter we went to a few different places. We went there. That felt the most comfortable. It's like a recruiting visit. It was about the relationships, Jeff. But Dr. Birch and her staff were amazing. And then again, they offer financing there, so they kind of take the headaches out of that. And great customer service, and they'll take you through a difficult case like Clark's was and Molly's was. My other two were much easier, but Molly had a difficult case too. And again, check out Birch Orthodontics. BURCH orthodontics.com is the website, and set up your free consultation.
You know how in recruiting you can have success, like you were talking about it being recruiting. You can have success at a certain school, and that begets more success at that school. Coach gets to know your staff and appreciates who you are.
Get a pipeline.
That's right. Some of his players develop and go on and do good things. So then he feels emboldened to tell these younger kids, hey, see what Johnny did? You can do that too. We've got good relationships with Florida State. Well, I've got to tell you, all these years later, it's early in the process. I didn't know where to go, but Ira told me, have you ever talked to Dr. Birch? And I thought, lo and behold, I have. She used to belong to the Sunrise Rotary Club that I give speeches to at the start of every football season. That'll be an interesting one this year, because I'm pretty sure I told them all they were going to be pretty good last year. Anyhow, but
there's a couple I went to that will not be inviting me back, I'm sure.
But I remember having met her because she was there and I would talk to her there. But then when you had a glowing review, I was like, between these two things, it's got to happen. Boom. The pipeline was completed. We're all good. So it's a good analogy on your part.
Appreciate it.
Before the hour ended last hour, we were talking about how, if you haven't noticed, if you guys were just enjoying your day off yesterday, a lot of articles have been produced across the sports landscape regarding, and I'll get to these questions in a minute, but regarding what's happening with the Big Ten and the SEC. And the greed, they've been described as grifters, all these other things that we see now. And I was laughing because specifically, I was looking at Pat Forty, Dan Wetzel, off of Ross Dellinger's piece, and they were talking about how this is terrible. There's no leadership. We don't have we have strong men and grifters. It's all we got. They don't give a damn about the whole. They don't care about other sports. All they care about is money for the people at the top and no other. And I'm like, you disingenuous son of a bitch. I mean, Pat Forty has written multiple scathing articles targeting Florida State solely, who, by the way, weren't even the first to try to look out for their own best interest. I mean, lest we forget, the SEC raided the Big 12 and took Oklahoma and Texas and neutered an entire conference.
And then the Big 10 did the same thing to the Pac-12.
Yes, all this stuff. But it's Florida State. That's the problem, because lo and behold, they're concerned with not getting left behind. Lo and behold, they're concerned that the people they seek to compete against are now making $20, $30, $40 million annually more, for which they can obviously bring in and entice the best coaches, create the best facilities, and in today's day and age, have the deepest pockets for NIL and recruitment, talent acquisition, you name it. And yet it was Florida State that's the problem. And all of a sudden, they're waking up to this, oh, well, this doesn't seem right. I don't like what the SEC and the Big Ten's do. Where have you been, man? What are you talking about?
It's been, I think I've tweeted this before. What we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years with those two conferences, it's been like watching crime bosses, crime families, take out their competition, kneecap their competition.
Correct.
And it's been happening in broad daylight. Man, listen, go back to what happened to Florida State, the snub. When Greg Sankey, when ESPN, and again, they're complicit in all of this. If
it was
not
a 45-minute filibuster.
I mean, they brought him on to game day to just kneecap Florida State in their case. And the ESPN was a willing participant in that. So that's where I get so frustrated with anybody who's come back later in the year, the last year or two since, and said, oh, well, ESPN, that's not really. Yeah, man, they are 100% co-conspirators, 100%. And that's fine. It is what it is, but it's all been out there in the open. Like, that's the one thing I'll give Sankey credit for in the new Big Ten president, is that nothing has been shrouded in secrecy. They have been telling us now for 2 or 3 years, this is where it's going. We're going to run this sport and we don't care about anybody else. But to your point, yeah, we're in the media. So I think we hyper focus on the media a little bit, but Pat Forty and those guys, I don't feel like they were, I don't know if they were dumb or not paying attention or disingenuous, but it's unbelievable, the about face.
Well, I'm gonna side with disingenuous, intellectually dishonest, because we both know all these gentlemen that we're referencing. We've met them, worked with them, talked to them, been in the same places as them. Even if we don't know them, we kind of know them. We know of them.
Their careers, yeah.
Yeah, they're not dumb. The vast majority of the folks who rise to that level and have that kind of platform didn't get there. Not all, but didn't get there by being dumb. They're not dumb. So that means they're choosing, and they chose to do the things that they did and say the things that they did for the purposes of what? I don't know, creating an article or fodder or whatever you want to say.
Maybe just stirring up the masses, getting attention, maybe.
Right. Whatever it was. But what bothered me about it then, and it bothers me about it now, is they didn't seem to take into account the long-term repercussions of those things, and ignoring the much larger issue and attacking a singular school, or pretending that they didn't understand the modus operandi of an athletic department. I mean, who are we kidding? There are a bunch of schools who recognized, oh, the train's leaving the station. We're in real trouble if we're not on that train.
Right.
And I read that kind of stuff and I get angrier and angrier, because none of them are coming out and saying, well, in retrospect,
Florida State wasn't the canary in the coal mine. They saw the canary. They were the first one to find the canary and realize there was a problem. Real quick on that topic, and we'll get to questions. The one thing I just want to put out there again is that just because there was talk a month ago or 6 weeks ago from some of the national media that Florida State is in some sort of settlement talks with the ACC, and that's been ongoing now. That's been publicly known since, I think, in the fall. I think September that came out. The goal of Florida State is not to stay in the ACC long-term, even though there are some settlement talks. The plan is to do whatever they can in the short term to get as much resources as they can. But the end goal is still the same end goal. Like Florida State, since, really, I think it was because of I can't remember if it was the Pac-12 rating or if it was the Big 12 rating, but one of those is
What are
what
the
set,
ratings?
one of those ratings, RAIDINGS, was
Yeah.
what set Florida State all of this in motion, because they realized this is where this is going to go. And so that's still the goal, So when people saw the talk about Florida State and the ACC and singing Kumbaya and all that, that's never been like the long-term plan. They may have to stay in the conference a year or 2 or 3 years longer than people wanted, but that's not the goal. And in fact, it's hard to see how the ACC, it's hard to see how there's anything other than a Power 2, just a few years down the road.
It's weird. It's we've all been in situations, whether it's a work power dynamic, it could be a status situation when you're in middle school or high school with certain cliques and groups of people that you run around with. But we've all had moments where there's a eureka involved, where you're going, "Oh wait, they don't have my best interest in mind." Or, "Oh wait, this is going a very different direction, and I see the writing on the wall. I know what's going to happen. I can tell you the next 6 things that are going to happen based on the information that I have here." These context
we were good. We were good as long as these circumstances were in play.
Right.
But now we see what they're really about.
Yes. And when you get a context clue like that, and then maybe 2 or 3 more, you'll fight like hell to make sure that you're not in a disadvantaged position moving forward. I mean, you're going to do whatever you have to do, whether that's in the case of a workplace, find another job, whatever it might be. But that's exactly what Florida State was doing years ago. And what a lot of us talked about even before it became public, even before we had that Board of Trustees meeting on YouTube and all that other stuff. I remember having many conversations with guys that I've known that went to Florida State from the early 90s. And they were all like, "I don't like where this is headed." Like, this has been moving in a direction. Now, maybe we couldn't have foreseen the utter chaos that college football recruiting's become, but like, we knew this is where it was headed at some point. Now, the extent to which Sankey and the SEC and the Big Ten have gone and, just as you said,
just
made
out
it
in broad daylight. That's been the fact. This has not been smoke-filled rooms for the most part. It's been right there in broad daylight. And
and we watched, and I got mad about this, and I understand people will push back and say, "Well, Jim really inherited a mess." Yeah, man, but then he sat up there a few years ago and gave us the neighborhood analogy. That he was just counting on the goodwill of a tyrant, the goodwill of a guy who is, man, he is the wolf. Right. He's not in sheep's clothing. He's the wolf. What are you talking about?
Yeah, man. And these conference commissioners are like CEOs of businesses. Their job is to do whatever they can to make things better for the schools they represent, not take care of the school or the sport in mass. It would be nice if they thought that. Right. But yeah, Jim Phillips, that was his strategy, was just plead for them to be nice.
Yeah, we live in this neighborhood too. Please help.
Gated communities aren't good for anybody.
Yeah. Justin writes, "What's up, gents? Which is better? The smell of fresh cut grass." That's very high on my list. "The sight of your bride walking down the aisle." Corey, no need to specify which. I love that. That was good.
Oh, boy.
Or the sound of a metal bat on opening day. P.S. At which point does our undaunted bravado invite some chin music? Yeah, so somebody else noticed it.
Yeah, he's not the only one.
Yeah. Listen, Ira and I are obligated to say the sight of our bride walking down
100%,
the aisle.
1,000%, 1,000,000%.
Yeah, that's where we're going to say that. Now, I have to tell you, I don't love the sound of a metal bat. I love the sound of baseball. So that's cleats on clay. That's the smell of the grass. That is the sound of the organ. That is whatever it might be.
Even, what I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I even love like going to Tom Brown Park, and if I'm playing tennis or pickleball or doing something else, hearing the youth baseball or youth softball.
Yes.
I love that sound.
I love the sound of a ball being snapped off, landing in a glove. You hear that sound, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Baseball has that sort of thing where the stuff around the game or on the periphery of the game reminds you of your childhood, reminds you of many things that you absolutely still, the smells. Like, I don't do that in football.
Right.
Football just feels very gladiatorial and violent, and here we go. We're going to go watch these guys just beat the bejesus out of each other, and we're going to roar. But baseball is passive in that sense, and so yeah, I'm with him on that. It was awesome. And as far as the chin music goes, you don't see a lot of it in college baseball because the repercussions are severe. I remember one time asking Mike Martin years ago why we don't throw at more people, and he kind of chuckled. He's like, "Oh, believe me, I've wanted to, but Jeff, we don't do that." Yeah, he basically went into this whole thing about why you don't do it, and I mean that was kind of a idealized version of college baseball back in the day. Now it's almost close to pro-like baseball because there are fewer minor league teams and guys are going straight to the league within like 2 years. You see it happen. But yeah, you can get away with a lot in college baseball that if you did in the pros, you would wear it in the neck your next time up. So
yeah, I guess they're all used to it now. Because as you said, this is how, and it's even gone down to some levels below college baseball where you have all this stuff. So maybe they don't bother it. Like even Wes Mendez. I think he did it where he did the sticking his tongue out after a big strikeout to end an inning, and he said he did it because Jamie had done it, and the Friday and Saturday starters had done it. So I don't even know if they take it as I don't know if the other players on other teams are taking it back because they're doing it to other teams too, I guess.
I don't get it. I never will. If you're Jamie Arnold, you might be the first pick in the draft. Love you, brother. You don't got to stick your tongue out at somebody. It's just silly. Saying it out loud is ridiculous. Right. I mean,
we're just boys being boys. We're having fun.
Walter writes, "Hello, gents and Corey. If FSU joins the Big Ten or the SEC, you pick whichever conference you want. Which road game would you look forward to the most? As for me, it would be Austin, Texas. Great food, great music, and bats." That's from Walter. What's the locale that you would most be excited to visit?
Man, there's a lot. And it was, again, man, that would be cool. And I've been to a lot of the SEC stadiums because of, when I covered Florida, but I never went to Bryant-Denny. I think that would be pretty cool. I've never been to Sanford Stadium. I've never been to Georgia. That would be really cool. Big Ten wise, man, the big house, I guess. Well, Penn State would be awesome.
Oregon. We forget
Oregon would be awesome.
Yeah, Oregon's the one that I'm going to choose because I'd love to go out to that stadium. And I know I got a buddy of mine who graduated from Oregon, and he said it's a cool game day experience, and it looks like it is every time I tune in. Yeah. So I've been to Washington.
I'm sure Gene's hoping for the SEC. From the travel budget perspective.
Yeah, from the travel budget standpoint, yeah. I've already got Stanford written down. I'll be at that game next year. But no, I've been to Washington, and it's really cool. But I've never done Oregon, so that would probably be my pick. I'm with you, though. Many of those SEC schools. Have you been to the Grove? I've heard it's awesome.
I have not. No, I have not been there.
So that's kind of one that I think I would rather enjoy as well. Fellas, you guys are great as always. Thank you very much, Jonesing for FSU. Who's an offensive lineman that was here last year that you believe could compete for playing time this year? Ira, we're both going to say the same guy in Otto, right?
Oh, is he – I thought he meant he meant guys that left. I thought that's what he was talking about. The guys who started last year and left.
Who is an offensive lineman that was here last year that you believe could compete for playing time this year?
Right. You read it right. I mean, I think Otto could be in the mix. I'm trying to think if
what's his name? The kid who
Rizzo played.
But so did the guard who got hurt.
Rizzi. Richie Leonard's obviously.
Yeah, Richie Leonard.
He definitely will. Yeah, he definitely he may end up being one of the starters. But I think Jacob Rizzi, who came in last year from Harvard, played some late in the year. I think he could be. And then I don't know about any of the younger guys. You still wonder about Estes, who's been here for 4 years now. I mean, what I'm curious about, one of the things I'm really interested to see this spring, and I asked Mike Norvell about this the other day at when I talked to him over in Pensacola. When you do bring in new coaches and you have 6 new coaches, not only, you brought in new players, obviously, but now these existing players who've been here get a fresh slate. And he said, he agreed. He said that sometimes that happens as a coach, as a position coach, you remember all the things that you didn't like about a player, or you remember things that they've struggled with, and you see them in that light. And then you have a new position coach comes in and they see him in a different light.
Yeah.
And or that player also sometimes responds differently to that position coach. So there could be some guys on this roster that we haven't seen yet that have been there. I mean, they had 6, 7 other offensive linemen who didn't play. You could see one of those guys emerge too.
It's interesting to me. I think Estes is a candidate, a real strong candidate. You mentioned him a moment ago. He's one of the strongest guys on the team, and I never thought he was
Very
that
strong.
bad when he got opportunities.
Right.
I thought he played well. For whatever reason, he was in the doghouse, it seemed like, a lot. To me, that's the only conclusion I could come to, because I thought that there were some guys that got time over him at moments that maybe weren't as playing as well as he did in practice at times. Now,
well, I mean, you definitely get, I mean, listen, man, we watch the same guys roll out there week after week after week and be bad. So I'm not saying, at some point you just, hey man, you want to try somebody else? Maybe maybe the light comes on. It's not like you were having success with the ones you're rolling out there.
Yeah, we're going to stay with this dominant group I've got going out here. More of your headliner questions when we come back. Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV. Rolling on Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio and Warchant TV. Before we get to more questions here, Ira, longtime usher over at the TLC Double C, passed away. And I think you wanted to make mention and a shout out seems very childish, but an acknowledgement certainly of he and his family.
Yeah, Bill Turner, and I didn't know him that well, but it was just, there are people, because of the community we work and live in the FSU sports community. There are a lot of people you just get to know through the years. There's another, and I think Usher, I don't know if Usher's the right word or not. There's another lady that works at the Tucker Center that's worked there forever. And when Alexa, my daughter that's about to graduate from Florida State, when she was 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years old, she would come to the FSU women's games with me. And this lady was very sweet to her. So actually, just like a month ago, I may have mentioned it, like a month or two ago, Alexa came to a game with me, and we just kind of hung out with her and took pictures with her. She through the years, she's always asked me about Alexa, and Alexa has always asked me about her. And they had this little relationship from just meeting at the games. And Bill Turner Jr., who, and again, I didn't know him well, but he's just one of those friendly people that every time I would see him at the games, he would just always have something nice to say. He worked down on the floor level, so I would interact with him a lot. And I'm sure, and a lot of people, if you've been to Florida State basketball games, you've certainly seen him. You've probably interacted with him. Sweet guy. He passed away this past week, and just want to give him a shout. And the reason I saw it was because, Woody, who does the PA, he posted about it. And then it was seeing the outpouring of support. Stan Jones, the assistant coach, everybody that's been at games at the Tucker Center really got to know him and meet him and really like him. And so just wanted to, kind of pay our respects and send our well wishes to his family.
It's interesting you bring it up, Ira. It is one of the great things about being in a community like Tallahassee and the job that we have, but it's true too for fans, people who maybe don't work in this industry, but go to all the games. You're right. You foster those relationships, even if they're just something slightly more than acquaintances. They're people whose friendly faces and smiles you always appreciate over the years by going to these events. I've got a ton of them for baseball, a ton of them for basketball. It's a little less so for football because of the nature of football and what happens there. But yeah, the more intimate settings, you certainly, you're like, I've seen this guy for 25 years. I'm sometimes reminded of how old I am. And unfortunately, Ira, this, I mean, we've lost some people in this business that we've worked with or worked alongside over the years. And you're reminded of that. And you go into those press boxes or you walk into those stadiums and arenas and you're like, gosh, man, so-and-so's been gone for 4 years now, or so-and-so has been gone for 15 years in some cases, and you're just kind of blown away by all of that. So it is good to acknowledge them. I'm glad you did that.
And also just another reminder to just be nice to people, because seriously, because it was neat watching the responses.
It's awesome.
It's a tragic event, but like so many people sharing messages on Facebook about how and everybody seeing, just a kind smile, man. It does. People remember that. Unfortunately, it's not the norm, but it stands out if you're one of those kinds of people.
Side note: did you see any of the SL50?
Most of it. Most of it.
And the Adam Sandler song got me.
Oh, it was
when he had to catch himself when he brought up Farley, I was like, oh man,
that was tough. But it was It was good. Yeah,
It
you're
was
right. It
good.
was really good.
It
Yeah.
was really, really good. Ray says, can somebody please tell the NFL to have the Super Bowl on Saturday? We've been saying it for years. Everybody would like the Super Bowl to be on a Saturday. RAA writes, gentlemen, can I ever get a breakdown on the increased revenue from beer sales for FSU? Is that where the budget surplus comes from? This weekend at Hauser should have covered track for the year. Also, is walk-off hit to clinch a run rule victory really a walk-off hit?
Yeah, that was a weird one. Most of us didn't even realize the run rule was in effect because
Yeah.
and so it's just a hit, and then all the James Madison players just start going to their dugout. I think they were happy.
I think they were ready to leave.
Yeah. Can we get this over with? Crew a couple more fastballs here. And yeah, it was weird. And then people in the post-game press conference were asking, talking about the walk-off, and it was a weird phrasing for it. Yeah, man, that's the beer sales at Hauser is not just, and no, that's not where the surplus comes from, but what's amazing to me is that this is just this world where we live in where these college kids can afford those beers, not ripping the beers or the cost of the beers. But man, when I was in college,
yeah.
I mean, if a beer was more than and I know times have changed, but still, man,
more than $2.
Yeah, man, these college kids, they're not afraid to down some $10 beers, whatever they cost there.
I'm not proud of this, but I've admitted it on the show before. But just a reminder, I sold my plasma to be able to buy beer. I mean, I gave plasma just to drink some beers on a Thursday night.
I did too. Yeah, 100%, man. I think they'd give like $20 or $25.
Yeah,
I gotta go out tonight.
And you only needed to drink 2 beers after you gave up all your plasma.
Dude, 100%.
Gents, writes Tyler, as somebody who loves baseball, it is a pleasure to see the attention to detail this team plays with. Quality at bats for the most part, smart on base paths. Does Link prioritize this more than past coaching staffs, or can it be attributed to bringing in higher caliber players? Well, I think it's a little bit of both. And there was a time that Florida State valued that for many, many years under Mike Martin. And I know it was Mike Martin Jr.'s intent to have more quality at bats, but you're right. It certainly resonates more right now. I think everything about this program right now, you cannot chalk up to chance, because he is a guy that is intimately involved with the details of everything that happens within Florida State's baseball program. I admire it. I think some people would view it as like a kind of a red ass approach, but that's what you need to win and to be great and to ensure that you play a certain way. And Link cares very deeply about how they play. So I do think you're going to consistently see that this team does things the way you want them done in the game of baseball. I believe that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. And I think we're seeing that his evaluations are really good. I think understanding what works at certain positions, what he wants, the blueprint he wants at different positions, you're kind of seeing that come to fruition now as he's 3 years into this. I would say this, man, during Mike Martin Jr.'s tenure as the hitting coach, the offensive coach, I thought there was a long time where I really liked their approach. I thought it was a very smart approach, and I thought it worked really well. They constantly led, one of the top in the country in on-base percentage, and they did a lot of really good things. I felt like they kind of got off, the last several years, they just kind of went to that new age, swinging for the fences in all counts at all times. That's just not fun to watch. And I think we've seen pro baseball come back as well. And to me, it's a much better game. It got pretty gross there. And I think it was worse in college because you didn't have as good of hitters.
Correct.
So I think they got off their path, but for a long time, I thought their approach was really good.
Corey writes, with the news about the playoffs expanding, the Big Ten and the SEC holding all the power, is it possible that this could kill the sport? Is it possible that the casual fan is too great for it to fail? Well, it's interesting. There's one part now. I thought it was sort of representative faux concern, but allegedly ESPN is not in love with some of the suggestions about the 4 automatic qualifiers for the SEC, 4 automatic qualifiers for the Big Ten, 8 of the 16 teams, because they're going to 16 at some point here very soon. I rolled my eyes and thought BS. But the point they were making, or alleged to have made, is that they did recognize it is entirely possible that you alienate a large swath of the country by doing that. And that is correct. You absolutely could. And I do think college football is headed down a road that is not a healthy one. You know, the last time you and I were talking about what's going on in college football, it was pointed out various articles that the ratings had never been better. And I said to you at that time, buddy, I think this is the beginning to the end of those ratings. I don't believe this is going to continue to be an upwardly mobile product because of what's happening in the sport right now. We just hear from too many people who are absolutely at their wits' end and do not feel that there's anything collegial about what they're watching. And I've said over and over again, pro football already exists and they do it better. And the ratings for pro football continue to skyrocket. But that's because people know who's on their team and who's going to be on their team next year. And contracts are contracts. And people can't just walk from one school or one program or one franchise to the next. Like you got.
And you always know you got a shot. You
Yes.
just win your division, get a wild card berth, whatever it is,
You got a
got a shot. The problem is, if you alienate this big part of the world, not give Gene Williams credit because he back when we were among the many people sounding the alarms and everybody else was oblivious to this. And we were talking about this is where it's going. It's happening in wide open view. And we were talking about, why doesn't ESPN do something about it? And Gene made a good point. He's like, listen, man, the people making the decisions at ESPN today don't care about 10 years down the road.
That's correct.
They care about their bottom line today because they're trying to make their nut, they're trying to make their money. And for the next, as long as they're there, they may be somewhere else in 3 years. They may be in a different part of Disney or some conglomerate. So I thought that was really smart. And I think he was 100% accurate. It's bared out. But I do think we're at the point now, and I'm guessing if that concern is legitimate, it probably is, because I don't know why they have to, fawn concern anymore, because it is what it is. But they may have an idea of what those numbers are going to look like for these other conferences. Because once I still feel like fans of schools that, even if you've got a 1% chance of getting in, you might still have hope. They're probably still going to have some interest, but the casual fans are not going to. Why would they ever watch these minor league teams? Because that's what it'll be. Now, as the SEC and the Big Ten get greater and greater, and they've got all the best players, and that's where all the money is, you might be able to attract more like NFL fans that are not college football fans, that don't have an allegiance. Maybe you replace some of the disaffected college football fans with new fans. Maybe that happens. But ESPN's problem is they have all these channels and they want to go a direct to consumer model. They're going to have all this inventory that nobody would care about. So hopefully maybe they're at that point where they are legitimately concerned about it. But, it would have been nice if that had been in effect or had any sense of that concern even just 2 years ago.
And it's also true to say that TV executives, all the networks are short-term guys. So to your point, the same point you made that Gene made is true now. Like the guy that's at Fox or the guy that's in charge of any of these decisions may not be there 5 years from now. His job is to kick ass.
He doesn't even want to be there 5 or 10 years. Doesn't care.
No. Yeah. So it's absolutely true. And I do think the sport is in a little bit of trouble. They could rectify it. They need some parameters here. I will say that. Matt writes, baseball trajectory sounds really optimistic. Seems like baseball has same woes with the ACC, same chance to lose top talent to more money and cachet at the SEC schools, though. If football's trajectory is too hard to predict, does that basically mean you trust Link more than Mike? Well, I will say this. I do trust Link more than Mike currently. I also think that as far as baseball goes, the long-term problems that Florida State's going to face in baseball are very real. They are very real. I believe he's going to be able to do more with less right now. But I do not believe 10 years from now, if this gap continues to grow between the SEC and the ACC in terms of annual monies, that Florida State will be able to compete with the top-tier schools of the SEC in baseball. I think that they will be affected by that.
Yeah, the one thing I would say, though, is I do feel like baseball is a little bit unique in the sense that there's so many kids that play baseball.
That's true.
There's a very small talent pool of college football players that can win you games. So the resources are more finite, so the market is going to be much higher. baseball, man. And again, look at the guys he's found. I mean, the Chase Williams, he says the most explosive, player he's ever had. He got him out of a junior college. He gets a guy from Texas. He gets a kid from Ole Miss who was not having a lot. Wes Mendes wasn't having a lot of success at Ole Miss. He looked great this weekend.
He was awesome.
Yeah, and they've tweaked some things with his mechanics, and so I feel like there's a little bit more of a path to have success in baseball because there are so many players out there, and because I think I'm not going to say coaching matters more, but there are some things you could do. Football, a lot of times, it's bigger, stronger, faster, man. And if they're getting all the biggest, strongest, fastest kids, I just think it's the market is going to be much more, much more structured in favor of those Power 2 conferences.
The OG Sean just questions whether or not this is the greatest weekend rotation in Florida State baseball history.
Sean loves the death dealer and his disciples.
Yeah.
He's still pushing for the death dealer.
I love that he does that, but I have a suspicion we're going to be able to find a more dominant trio.
There's been some really good ones.
Yeah. There's been some unbelievable ones, especially ones that when I first arrived. I mean, walking out there and seeing Paul Wilson and those guys, it was Jonathan Johnson, and I mean, it was something to behold. Seminole Headlines, 93.3 Real Talk Radio, Warchant TV continues in a moment. Come back, wrap it up. More headliner questions. Let's keep it rolling as we round things out. So I'm flying for business to Dallas today, writes Chaco McNasty. Do any of you have any funny airport stories? Did you ever see anything wild in an airplane? Thank you for all you do. Love you all. Thank you, Chaco. Funny airplane story. I got frustrating airport stories and airline stories. I don't know that I saw anything funny.
I've seen some videos of some interesting stuff on airplanes, but not. I don't. No, I think the funniest story that to me, and I think I told this. I definitely tweeted. I don't know if I told the story on here, but man, I was in an airport. This is probably like 2 years ago, and there was this guy on the phone with his wife, and he's like, you can tell he's just exasperated. And he's like, I know. And then finally he goes, yeah, you're right. I effed it up. And you know what? I'm going to F up again tomorrow and probably another 10 times this month. That's what I do. It was just, and there was like another guy standing out like 5 feet away from me. And we just looked at each other like, oh man, we've had that conversation. Like this dude, yes, I know I screwed it up. I'll tell the whole airport, yes, I screwed it up and I'm going to screw up again. How long do you have to just berate me about this? It was a pretty funny moment.
I will only say, if you want a funny story, and that is funny, by the way. I read a book called Guilty, and it was about the O.J. Simpson trial, and it was written by that famous attorney who was, I'm drawing a blank right now, a great name. Anyhow, he was the lead prosecuting attorney in Los Angeles for like 40 years. He did the
right.
Yeah, he ended up doing the Manson trial. Well, I got that book in the airport before I was flying to Heathrow in London, and I had never been on a plane, well, not that I can remember, of a flight that long. I flew over from Holland, where I was born when I was 4, but I don't remember much more of that. Anyhow, back then, Ira, you got free drinks on any plane flight that was over the pond.
Mm-hmm.
And I went with my then girlfriend to Europe. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to sleep because I can't sleep on airplanes. And I had this book. And I read it cover to cover. And I ended up raising my hand for another Heineken over and over again. The whole plane's asleep. And this one poor stewardess had to get me a beer.
Flight attendant, Jeff.
Okay. Waitress in the sky. I raised my hand repeatedly, and you could see the look on her face like, this drunken ass. And I was just steady. Vincent Bugliosi is the author. Anyhow, I'm reading that book because it was riveting. And he had all this evidence that was not presented and all this other stuff. I must have pounded 16 Heinekens on the flight to London, legitimately. And like about the 10th one, she's like, sir, are you okay? And I think she wanted to cut me off, but I was so polite. I was like, yes, ma'am, I'm doing well, thank you. And I just kept reading, so she had to keep doing it. And so we landed, and I was obliterated, and my girlfriend wanted to disown me because we landed there, and it was the morning.
At one point, she's like, you know what? You're going to be London's problem.
Yeah.
You're not going to be my problem in 2 or 3 more hours.
Oh, it was awesome. Yeah. And then right off the bat, we were going to like Piccadilly Circus, and I was obliterated in 7 in the morning in London time. My girlfriend's like, "You're an ass. What are we doing?" I'm like, "Oh, it's all right." So there's my plain story. There you go. What do we got? Hello, headliners. This is from Orlando City, Noel. I've been to 3 different grocery stores down here in Polk County, and I can't find registers. I plan on bringing this up to the meat manager, but do you think that this absence of quality sausage could be playing a role in a lack of recruits from the area?
It could be. It could be. Ben, get on this. Yeah, we need the registers down in Polk County for sure. And ask your meat manager. And then, yeah, man, Ben, tell them registers wants to be in their store. They'll have it delivered to them.
Trailer Swift says, "Gents, I saw that Lester got a DUI. So does that mean he's poised for a breakout year, or that he's transferring to Georgia?"
Yeah, there's a lot of Georgia comments after that one.
Yeah, I love how the articles mentioned FSU was 2-10 last season, as if that's the reason for the incident.
Things are amuck. Now they're 2-10. Yeah, it's Charles Lester was arrested. It was last week, charged with DUI back in Bradenton. He's from the Sarasota, Bradenton area. So I guess he had gone back home that weekend. And, FSU, we'll see how it plays out. I mean, if it's handled, it doesn't sound like it was a DUI that resulted in any kind of injuries or anything, right, thankfully. And so, he was released on $500 bond. He's with the team going through things. It's going to be handled internally. We'll see if anything else comes out of it, but yeah, it's unfortunate, and hopefully he learns from it. And just thankfully, it sounds like nothing bad happened, which could have happened.
Anthony writes, "Can you guys walk through how each of you got into where you are in sports media? Jeff, what led you to Tallahassee Radio? Ira, how did you end up covering FSU?" And then he wanted to know, Corey, why wasn't he covering Georgia instead of FSU or that? Corey can't answer that right now, but I'll forward him this question he can do it on Wake Up Warchant next week. Ira, how did you end up here? I've never asked you. Thomasville. You were in Thomasville, right? I know that you used way back when you covered the University of Florida. But then how did you end up covering Florida State? Was it the Thomasville connection?
Well, so I went to Thomasville. That was my first full-time job when I got out of college. So I did get to cover Florida State some then. When I was working in Thomasville in the mid-90s, I would actually come down and cover Florida. That was one of the perks of the job when they hired young sports writers is, hey, and on Saturday, which is your day off, you can go down and cover Florida State if you want. Yeah. So I did. And I came down a bunch of times. I think I came down and covered the Miami ass kicking when they were on probation.
47-0.
Yeah, I came down for that game. And
I chose out that game.
And so I would come down and so I covered some from that. And then I had gone to work in Maryland, and I was a city editor of a newspaper up in Maryland. I'd gone to the news side. I was running a news operation up in Maryland.
That's right.
And liked it and enjoyed it when there were big stories, but was not always enthralled with the city council meetings and some of the day-to-day stuff. Osceola had some openings. Jim Lamar and I worked together. He worked with me down at Vegas Insider in South Florida. He took over as Osceola general manager, asked me if I would want to come down. Wasn't sure because I didn't know if I want to go back into sports. But my wife, Kim, actually said, you always seem happier when you're covering sports. And she was right. So I came back down. I remember I talked to Corey because Corey had worked with me in Thomasville, and he was a huge FSU fan. So I told him, I said, hey, man, I'm thinking about going to work at the Osceola. What do you think? And he goes, let me ask you a question. Who's Florida State's best player right now? And I was like, I don't know, man. And I was like, I think maybe Michael Boulware. I've seen that name. And he goes, no, man, it's Darnell Dockett. He goes, I need to be covering Florida State, not you. Because he was working in Atlanta at that time. But anyway, yeah, so I ended up taking the job. And then very quickly started pushing to get the Democrat to hire Corey because I tried to hire him at the Osceola, but he ended up getting the job at the Democrat because, he's obviously at home covering Florida State. And listen, man, yeah, he went to Georgia for college. He was in state. He's a Nole. That's where he wanted to go. He would have come to Florida State, I'm sure, I don't know if he didn't apply or not, but he's a Nole 100%.
I kind of backed into it in a weird sort of way. When I was in school here, I was always listening to sports talk radio, Rick Ballou and those guys, Tom Block way back in the day. And really quick, and it's a more convoluted story. I actually feel like I owe my career in radio to a buddy of mine who happens to be my attorney. He's down in Miami. Kevin Jacobs came up to visit. He had been here working here for a while, and before he got his firm job down in Miami. And we were having a beer together one day, and he turned to me and said, "You're going to be the guy in my book who should have done something with this talent but never did." And it crushed me because I knew he meant it. And he's like, "Man, you know you should be a sports talk radio host. You're funny. You know the sport. Why don't you do it? You've said you want to do it. Go do it." And it was kind of him to say. It hurt my feelings, but I in retrospect owe a lot to him, because in that moment I felt like I was at a crossroads. And anyhow, a bunch of hoops I had to jump through, and eventually I got into radio, and it all worked out.
So did you grow up listening to sports talk radio?
So sports talk radio was not big when we were kids.
It was more. There's more news talk radio, which I listened to a lot. When I was a kid, because I was that dorky kid. And then there was some. It started to come around a little bit.
Yeah, I think I was listening to what was One-on-One Sports. It was called One-on-One Sports. Later became Sporting News Radio. When I was in school here, I was listening to that kind of stuff. But then when I was a counselor at the time and kind of working my way through school, and a buddy of mine was like, "You should do sports talk radio," and then that was the germ of an idea. And then eventually, then I was obsessed. I wanted to do it, and it ended up working out. Man, this flew past, buddy. Thanks for doing it. This was good. Corey, we'll get you back in here next week, brother. Hope you're winning a lot of money. Ben, thank you so much. And thanks to all of you. Any questions we didn't get to? I think we got to most all of them because there was no Facebook stuff this week. I'll answer in the bonus hour, which is coming up next. Ira, have a good rest of your day. Be well, everybody. Peace.